This is a picture of me and my best friend about to board a plane to Europe. The year's 1979. I was 16 and it was our first real trip. Just 2 plane tickets and barely enough cash to last 2 months. We hitchhiked, slept in parks and train stations, and had the time of our lives. That summer changed everything. From then on, I was hooked on travel. What I didn't realize then was that 1979 also marked the end of an era. The collapse of the Hippie Trail, the fabled overland journey from Europe to India and Nepal that had defined counterculture travel throughout the late 60s and 70s. Now, I was too young to catch the Hippie Trail, but that summer in Europe, I caught its afterglow. And when I landed in Bangkok in 1990, I could see that something very similar was going on. A new kind of trail was taking shape. Cheap guest houses, shared guidebooks, conversations that shaped your next move. People started calling it the Banana Pancake Trail because everywhere you went, banana pancakes seemed to show up on the menu. And I didn't just pass through, I spent years on that trail. Asia travel became my world. So I want to be clear about what this video is. This is not a guide, it's not a hot take on how travelers ruined everything. It's just a personal reflection. At heart, I'm still an old backpacker and someone who's been drifting through this part of the world for around 35 years. What I'm sharing is what it felt like back then and how I think it feels now. Backpackers still come to Southeast Asia for the same reasons I did. Low prices, great food, it's safe, it's beautiful. But it's also different now. You land in Hanoi, your phone already knows where you're going. The Egg Coffee Place, Train Street, Haozang Loop. You go. It's beautiful. And you can do it all without ever leaving the beaten path, without talking to anyone, without ever even getting lost. Let's start this story where it really begins, with the Hippie Trail. In the 1960s and 70s, young people across the West were pushing back against the war in Vietnam, against the suburbs, against the 9-to-5 life waiting for them back home. They weren't just looking for a vacation, they wanted meaning, spirituality, hashish. The Hippie Trail offered all of it. It began in European cities like London and Amsterdam, funneled through Istanbul, and then split into branches heading toward India and Nepal. People traveled in VW vans or hopped on the magic bus. Some stuck to known routes, others just figured it out as they went. And wherever they stopped, a scene appeared. Tea houses, hotels, backpacker scenes. Some spots became legendary. The Pudding Shop in Istanbul, Chicken Street in Kabul, Freak Street in Kathmandu. These weren't just pit stops, they were gathering points, places where routes crossed, rumors spread, and plans changed. It was messy, unpredictable, and then it ended. 1979, the Shah is overthrown in Iran. The Soviets roll into Afghanistan. Suddenly, borders that were once porous shut tight. Embassies closed, no more visas. Travelers turned away. The Hippie Trail didn't fade away. It was cut. But that need to move, to drift, to find something new, didn't fade away either. It just moved further east. By the early 1980s, a new trail was forming in Southeast Asia. Backpackers started arriving in growing numbers, same motivations as the Hippie Trail, cheap prices, no set plans, a sense that real life might be happening somewhere else. I landed in Bangkok in 1990. Now, I'd traveled plenty by then. Europe, Latin America, hitchhiking across the United States. But Asia was different. Less traveled, less mapped. You couldn't look things up, you had to ask around. In guest houses and overnight buses, people swapped tips, drew maps on napkins, shared rumors about back roads and borders. Now, there wasn't an official route, but there were patterns. Bangkok was the hub, the place you landed, your first tuk-tuk, your first banana pancake. Then north to Chiang Mai, or south to the islands, Koh Samui, Koh Phangan, Koh Tao. Bali had its own scene since the 1960s, mostly surfers and sun worshippers. Myanmar had just started offering 2-week visas. It was exciting. Cambodia? Fly into Phnom Penh. Couldn't go overland because the Khmer Rouge were still out there. Laos was possible, but barely. There were rumors that a boat to Luang Prabang had been shot at, possibly by remnants of the Pathet Lao. Who knew? And Malaysia? Most avoided it. They had the death penalty for weed. But things were changing all the time, and we listened for news. There was no internet, of course, just real-time intel from people you met.
There was, however, one resource that everyone used.
Lonely Planet was started by a couple, Tony and Maureen Wheeler, who'd done the Hippie Trail in the 70s and wrote it up in a guide. By 1990, they had teams of writers, and there were guidebooks for most of the region. Everyone had a copy, dog-eared, scribbled on. You'd find them in guest houses left behind like breadcrumbs.
I always had a love-hate relationship with Lonely Planet. On the one hand, I appreciated that it was the first guidebook made for people like me, but it created its own echo chamber.
Places with good write-ups got mobbed. Places with bad ones had maybe cleaned up their act, but no one went back to check. And there was plenty that was not in the guidebook, but that was great, because it meant you had to figure things out for yourself. And often, that meant listening to a rumor.
So it's late 1990. I'm in Thailand, and I start hearing these whispers. Vietnam's open. You hear about Vietnam? No way. Now, Vietnam wasn't on anyone's list. There were no guidebooks, no instructions. The war had just ended 15, 16 years ago. How do I get a visa? Well, there's this place on Khao San Road. And that's how I ended up in Vietnam, not because I planned it, but because someone told me I could.
It's January 1991. Vietnam has just opened to foreign travelers, but not open like it is today. It was technically open, but with lots of rules you weren't supposed to break. You could fly into Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi and wander freely around those cities. But if you wanted to go anywhere else, you needed an official car, an official guide, travel to official sites.
I didn't do that.
My girlfriend and I rented a motorbike and tore off into the Mekong Delta. We ended up spending a week there. Every night we were stopped by local police. Couldn't check into hotels because what we were doing was illegal. So it became a routine. We'd go up to a hotel as it was getting dark. The hotel owners would call the authorities. They'd show up to see what the hell these Martians were doing in their town.
So we lied. Told them the law had changed. Mr. Nguyen at Vietnam Tourism told us we can be here.
Of course, they're not idiots. They knew we were full of it. But communications were poor. Maybe we'd misunderstood. Anyway, it was easier to just let us spend one night and make sure we got out of town first thing the next morning. And the Delta, it was magical. Floating markets at dawn, rice fields stretching to the horizon, kids waving from riverbanks as we rode along the Mekong. Most people hadn't seen a foreigner in like 15 years, maybe ever. We pantomimed, stumbled through broken French and English, about 3 words in Vietnamese, and somehow it worked. Back in Saigon, we kept going, caught buses up the coast. Nha Trang, Quy Nhơn, Quang Ngãi, Hội An, Danang, Huế.
So check this out. This is a book I got in Hoi An in 1991. I love this thing. It's written in Vietnamese, Russian, and English. Pages are falling apart, but it shows a Hoi An that no longer exists. Look at this old map. This used to be the whole town. This is what it looks like today.
Danang was a small port town, no tourists, no high-rises. Hue felt haunted. The citadel still had bullet holes from the 1968 battle that destroyed the town. And then, Hanoi.
I first saw my adopted city in a fever in the winter of 1991. Some spring roll in Hue had gotten me, and by the time we boarded the night train, I was already shivering with what turned out to be dysentery. Those few days have remained with me all these years like some half-remembered dream. We pull into this rusty train yard, and all around is this shimmering mist that the Vietnamese rather poetically call mưa bụi, rain dust. We stayed in a cheap hotel overlooking Hoan Kiem Lake. I spent 3 days crapping into a cracked squat toilet, waiting for the antibiotics to kick in. But when I could finally walk, I circled that lake, slowly. The city felt frozen in time. French balconies patched with corrugated iron. Shops selling baskets, silk, engine parts, duck embryos in the shell. Hanoi felt like an opium-laced vision of Paris, 50 years after its last paint job.
But beneath those crumbling balconies, life was pure Vietnam. It's impossible to imagine today the poverty of the place. Back then, Vietnam was the world's biggest exporter of scrap metal. But what stuck with me was Hanoi's pace. Outside the markets, life was slow, languid. Maybe it was the fever, but the whole city seemed to move with me in slow motion. Different from today. But part of me still sees Hanoi as calm. That first visit colored how I experienced the city ever since.
I didn't just pass through the Banana Pancake Trail, I lived it. From 1990 to 1996, I would teach English in Korea, save what I could, then hit the road till my money ran out, and then go back to Korea, later Cambodia, and do it again. And that rhythm worked for me. But by the mid-90s, things were shifting. First came the internet. You could look up destinations, even book a room before you got there. And right around the same time, the whole world showed up. In 1990, Southeast Asia greeted 21 million tourists. By 2019, that number was 137 million. Thailand stood at the epicenter, as it still does. Fewer than 7 million international arrivals in 1995, nearly 40 million by 2019. And these two things, digital convenience and overtourism, hit at once. Everything changed.
The biggest change? Before all this, discovery came from other people. Locals, travelers. I found out Vietnam was open because somebody told me.
And of course, today, travelers still swap stories. They still share tips.
But, and this is key, you don't have to.
Your phone already knows the route, the reviews, the room you're going to sleep in. And it's thousands and thousands of people hitting the same destinations.
Now let me be clear, I book rooms online, I use reviews. Today's travel is easier, more accessible, and probably safer than it used to be. But if you're not careful, if you don't leave some gaps in the plan, the whole trip can become a checklist.
In northern Vietnam, almost everyone I meet is on the same loop. Hoi An, Ha Long, Ha Giang, that goddamn train street. And I get it, those places are interesting, they seem exotic. But the question we all face today in an over-touristed world is how to balance Instagram's greatest hits with the detours. Sometimes it's just a matter of doing it a little differently. In Hoi An, get up at dawn before the tour buses arrive, when the light's golden and the town's quiet. In Hanoi, hike around Westlake, that small temple you never heard of, walk in. It's not about being a purist, it's about leaving room for discovery and surprise. But you know, it's all still here if you want it. Not long ago, a friend and I took a motorbike trip to the mountains of northern Vietnam. The road we followed was not on Google Maps. Let me repeat that. The road was not on Google Maps. We learned about it because the guy at our guest house pointed and said, "Go that way." So we did. No signs, no tourists. And we found ourselves amidst these perfect rice fields, limestone karst mountains, Hmong and white Thai villages where some people didn't even speak Vietnamese. And it reminded me that the trail isn't dead. You just have to work for it.
Well, that's my story. If you've ever been on the trail, then or now, what's yours? I'd love to hear it. Please drop it in the comments, and thank you for watching.